The wind off Lake Erie carried the scent of pine and cold iron as Jack Morgan stood by the window of his cramped apartment, a chipped mug of coffee cooling in his hands. At 40, he looked carved from stone, broad-shouldered, weathered by years in combat zones and construction yards. But the scars that mattered were inside. 3 years had passed since the accident that took his wife, Amanda. Since that night, every sunrise had felt like punishment. Only his 8-year-old daughter, Sophie, kept him moving. Bills stacked high, eviction notice on the counter, and a letter from a lawyer bearing his late father's name, William Morgan, changed everything. Jack hadn't spoken to the man in decades, yet tomorrow he'd stand in a lawyer's office beside his siblings, Victor and Diana, to hear what their father had left behind. Sophie, clutching her stuffed rabbit, asked if they had to move again. Jack forced a smile. "Not yet, Bug. First we see what Grandpa William left us." She nodded with that quiet resilience only children who have seen too much can muster. He didn't know it yet, but that letter would lead them to a forgotten estate, a mystery buried under a century of silence, and a secret worth more than every fortune his family had ever built. The lawyer's office smelled of oak and old paper as Harold Winters read the will. Victor received controlling interest in the Morgan development empire and 30 million in securities. Diana received the same, and Jack, black sheep soldier turned construction worker, was left a crumbling mansion on the cliffs of Lake Erie known as Eagle's Nest. His siblings laughed. To them it was a ruin, a tax burden. They offered him $50,000 to sell. Jack looked at the tarnished brass key on the table and said quietly, "It's not for sale." Days later, he and Sophie drove through skeletal trees toward the lake. When the mansion emerged from the mist, 3 stories of weathered limestone crowned by a silent lighthouse, Sophie gasped, "It's like a castle." To Jack it looked like years of unpaid work. Yet when the key turned smoothly in the lock, something felt alive inside those walls. The grand foyer greeted them with dust and echoes, but beneath the decay Jack sensed strength, foundations that refused to die. For the first time since Amanda's death, he saw possibility instead of loss. They would make this house a home, no matter how broken it was. By dusk, a storm gathered over the lake. A local named Frank Carver stopped by, a weather-beaten man who had once maintained the property. He brought an old generator and helped them set up camp by the fireplace. "Your father said this place was waiting for the right person," Frank murmured before leaving. As the wind moaned through cracked windows, Sophie whispered, "Do you think Mom would have liked it here?" Jack imagined Amanda's laughter echoing through these halls. "She would have loved the challenge," he said softly. Later, when Sophie drifted to sleep, a strange hum threaded through the walls, a melody rising and falling like distant voices. Storm, their husky, growled low. Jack pressed his ear to the paneling. The sound wasn't random, it was structured, harmonious. He dismissed it as wind until he found a hidden seam behind the fireplace. A press of the wood released a small compartment containing a carved wooden box etched with a 6-pointed star. Inside lay a faded letter signed Elizabeth Morgan, 1911. "To the keeper of Eagle's Nest, listen with your heart. The truest treasures are the voices of those who came before." Jack felt a chill that wasn't from the cold. Morning light revealed Eagle's Nest's majesty, hand-carved banisters, stained glass dulled by decades, a tower room overlooking the steel-gray water. Sophie explored every corridor while Jack studied the old blueprints. The mansion was sound but filled with oddities, hollow walls, decorative stars carved into beams, symmetry too precise to be random. Frank returned with supplies and mentioned the local legend of Elizabeth Morgan, engineer, musician, and visionary. "They say she built this place like an instrument," he said. When Sophie twisted one of the carved stars on the staircase, it rotated with a faint click, but nothing happened. "Maybe it's connected to something else," Jack mused. In the pantry, they found a hidden door leading down to a vast basement of arches and stone columns. Brass pipes rose from the floor, each marked with numbers and musical notes. Sophie traced a pattern on the ground shaped like concentric circles. Jack realized they were standing atop some kind of acoustic chamber, a design centuries ahead of its time. When they aligned the stars' segments according to Elizabeth's notes, the floor trembled and a spiral staircase opened into darkness. The melody returned, deeper now, calling them below. The staircase descended into a limestone chamber that shimmered under lantern light. Instruments of brass and oak filled the space, microphones, wax cylinders, levers. On one wall, a blueprint-read harmonic array, Phase 2. Hundreds of recordings lined the shelves, miners, songs, native chants, immigrant lullabies, voices from another century. Elizabeth had preserved history in sound. Sophie found an oak door labeled only by a keyhole. Beside it, carved in brass, the symbol 7C when Jack played one cylinder marked Wind Singer. May 14, 1911, a woman's haunting voice filled the room, the same lullaby Amanda used to sing. Sophie gasped, "That's Mom's song?" Jack's blood ran cold. The recording was over 100 years old. Elizabeth's journal explained that specific melodies, key frequencies, could activate the array and open the sanctuary beyond room 7C. The song, it said, was the first key. Jack barely slept that night, piecing together Elizabeth's writings. She believed sound never truly died. It lingered in matter, waiting to be awakened. What if this array did more than record? What if it allowed the past itself to speak? The next evening, footsteps echoed above. Storm barked and two strangers with cameras crept through the basement, agents of Maxwell Reed, the ruthless developer trying to buy the property. Jack's military instincts kicked in. He disarmed one man who confessed, "Reed wants what's under the house." When Jack refused to sell, Reed himself appeared days later, polished and predatory. $3 million, no questions asked, he offered. Jack stood firm. "It's not for sale." Reed's smile turned thin. "Then it'll be condemned." That afternoon, an email arrived. An official inspection notice signed by a commissioner on Reed's payroll. Jack, Sophie, Frank, and a local historian, Dr. Olivia Winters, raced to document everything before Reed could seize it. Olivia recognized Elizabeth's genius. She had built the world's first acoustic memory network, using the caves beneath Eagle's Nest to store sound itself. Together they discovered colored dots on certain recordings, combinations that formed a sequence. When played in order, the array might unlock the sanctuary. But Reed's men returned before they could finish. Jack hid Sophie and Storm as the intruders broke through the basement door. The fight for Eagle's Nest had begun. Jack led Sophie through an escape tunnel toward the lighthouse while Reed's team ransacked the mansion. They reached safety under the storm's cover and regrouped at Frank's cabin. Olivia uncovered Reed's true motive. His corporation trafficked historical artifacts for profit. The recordings weren't just history, they were priceless data banks of human culture. With Olivia's contacts, they rallied allies, preservationists, journalists, indigenous leaders. The next morning, Reed arrived again, offering a final bribe and veiled threats of demolition. Jack refused, backed by witnesses ready to expose him. When county deputies came to post a fraudulent condemnation notice, Olivia streamed everything live. Public outrage exploded within hours. As authorities intervened, Jack, Sophie, and Olivia returned to Eagle's Nest to finish what Elizabeth started. Playing the color-coded sequence, the array roared to life, walls humming as frequencies merged. The sealed door of room 7C clicked open, revealing the sanctuary. A cavern lit by crystalline stone, voices whispering in harmony. Holographic echoes, faces, and songs of generations long gone danced in the air. Elizabeth's final message resonated through the chamber. Remember us, and you will never be alone. As dawn broke, officials arrived to arrest Reed for corruption and trespass. Reporters swarmed the property, filming the rediscovered marvel beneath the Morgan estate. The government declared Eagle's Nest a National Heritage Site under Jack's stewardship, with Olivia leading its preservation program. For the first time, Jack felt peace. The mansion that began as a burden had become a monument to memory and a bridge between past and future. Standing beside Sophie in the tower room, he listened to the wind weave through the harmonic array, carrying the blended songs of all who had lived, loved, and dreamed within those walls. "Hear that, Bug?" he said. "That's our family, every voice that ever built this place." Sophie smiled. The melody of generations rose like sunlight through stone, proof that even grief can become grace when you choose to listen. And if this story moved you, if you believe some legacies are worth protecting, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and tell us in the comments what hidden stories you think the world has forgotten. Because somewhere out there, another voice is waiting to be heard, and your click might be the one that lets it sing again.